Welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly podcast featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from fresh perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 281, Walking Inside of Fear. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson and I am the host. I'm here today in my home studio in Orlando, Florida. And today is a great day to be alive. It's a wonderful Monday here in Orlando. It's a sunny day. And wishing you well this morning, wherever you may be around the world. I was just looking at our stats in Germany and Newfoundland, Canada. Friends, thank you for listening. And I want to do a special shout out today to Long Beach, California. Cali. I love me some California, and Long Beach is a really cool town. A lot of great waterways and parks, and a lot of great thinkers in Long Beach. So, friends, thank you for joining us. And to our Long Beach friends, thank you. We bless you on your journey. And we ask you, too, to share the show with people on a similar journey and of like mind. And again, I want to mention, when I'm in your area, I will, start to announce on the channel more and more when I'm going to be traveling so that maybe I can meet up with some of our listeners in person. But today, November 6th of the Authentic Spiritual Journey, believe it or not, friends, we are on show 281. And if you've been listening the whole time we've been on the air, I tend to be surprised, amazed, and delighted that we are still going after so many years, and it's still a pleasure and a blessing to my life, and I hope it is to yours as well. Today's theme is super important because of how much it impacts our life and just the journey at large. And the topic for today is walking inside of fear. Walking inside of fear. Oh, this is a big topic. And I've thought about this for a really long time before doing the show because it's something I've worked with personally, and I've also worked with my mentors on. How do I deal with it? How do I not run from it? And what do most of us do? Okay, first of all, let's just say, fear is frankly the major barrier that keeps you from being your highest spiritual self, and from growing into the person you really are designed to be. It is fear that is that major barrier. Now, in spiritual circles, you often hear fear spoken of in that way. Now, there are some positive aspects to fear, like I don't want to cross the street with cars coming, right? That's a healthy kind of fear. That's the kind of fear that keeps us safe. But the kind of fear we're talking about is the kind of fear that is based in the personality. We're talking about the kind of fear that that stifles growth. We're talking about the kind of fear that keeps us from living a full life. And fear, friends, I hate to say this, but it's true. Fear is a part of the curriculum. Fear is a part of the curriculum. I'm fond of saying this because of how fear gets demonized. Fear is a part of the curriculum. What does this mean? Well, it means that no matter who we are, no matter how much money we make, no matter if we're black or white or American, whether we're Jewish or Christian or Muslim or Buddhist, it doesn't matter. We all deal with fear. We all deal with fear. You've heard me say, there's nothing to fear. And people say, my goodness, nothing to fear. Are you crazy? What about fear of not having enough money? What about the fear of not having enough food? Or what about walking in a bad neighborhood? Well, just turn on the TV and the news. You see there's plenty to be afraid of. Yes, friends, I know. And what's so interesting is the more we focus on the things that are the things that challenge us in a negative way. In other words, the more we are fearful, the more we focus on it, of course, the more fearful we become. And fear then begins to steal our joy and our state of mind on the regular if we allow it to. So part of living a spiritual life, part of living an abundant life, is learning to face the fear. Learning to face the fear. So today's episode is really about facing the fear. It's about really facing it. It's not strong enough. Confronting our fear. And then when we're confronting it, like walking around inside it, like not being so afraid of the fear. You know, there's that great quote, there's nothing to fear but fear itself, right? JFK, right? John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. In other words, fear creates its own negativity, and then things begin to spin around that. And what started as a small fear, almost becomes this, I'll call it like this tornado of fear in our mind. And sometimes it even starts to get in our bellies and starts to become things like depression and anxiety, right? And really, that combination of anger and fear, that's what creates depression, right? It's all those types of feelings turned inward. So what's difficult, of course, about fear is that, as I said, it's part of the curriculum. We're all going to have to deal with it. There's also positives. There's also negatives of fear, right? There's the positive of, I have fear to not walk out into a busy street. Well, that's a rational fear. But saying, I have fear to walk out in public, that's not a rational fear. So there's great discernment. There's great lessons for us can be found as we learn to face the fear, confront the fear, walk around inside the fear. And then what we learn over time as we're able to do this is that the fear then starts to lose its power and energy. Fear is like an inner bully. I've worked with many people over the years, and we often call fear or anxiety the worry bully. I say, what are your worry bullies telling you? And it's like this inner bully that keeps us stuck. It's our inner bully that keeps, it's like it keeps the lid on of our dreams. Like we want to bust out, but that fear keeps us locked in. So when we learn to face it, confront it, and walk around inside of it, well, you can imagine that it begins to lose its grip right away because we're not running from it. We're not running from it. We're facing it. We're seeing that we're checking out what is the reality of this fear that's living inside of me. What is the reality of this fear that's keeping me from moving forward in my life? A dear friend of mine from many years ago, I've spoken about her before. Her name's Reverend Sharon Poindexter, and she, at the end of her life, was dealing with this health journey that was quite significant. She had cancer and had to deal with this great deal of fear towards the end of her life. And she first thought this fear was about pain, but the deeper she got in her process, what she realized, it wasn't really about the pain. She was fearful rather of could she handle it? So the fear of being inadequate and not being able to handle it was actually a bigger fear than the fear of the pain. And once she realized that fear began to lose its grip. And she was able to see that as she moved forward on this journey, as she began to listen inwardly to see what those inward responses were, that when she realized what the fear really was, she could begin to confront it in a real way. She began to dialogue with that fear, almost to ask it questions and receive guidance as to what that fear was really about. And the more she did this, the more the fear could back down and the more at peace she could be. Now, this is super important to kind of pause here for a moment and say, how could one in the middle of this type of diagnosis, confront the fear? I mean, this was, in my view, this was a major spiritual lesson. It was a major spiritual adventure is not the right word, but spiritual trial to be able to, be struggling with an illness and at the same time trying to see what is this here now and why is it here for me now and what is this trying to teach me? As I'm saying all this, what I realize is that to do that type of inner work, to do the depth of that process, which required meditation, it required journaling, it required, talking to friends and colleagues, it required time alone, like literally during times of dialysis, to close her eyes and do the work of the soul. To do all of that, she had to move out of denial. She had to move out of denial. So what is denial? Well, denial is very simply refusing to see the truth. Denial is refusing to see the truth. There are often whole family systems built around denial. It's often denial of an addiction. Say someone in the family has alcohol or drug addiction. Sometimes there's denial about work addiction and spending addiction. There's often denial about healthy choices and consequences. So denial is refusing to see the truth. And frankly, it's an unwillingness to see the truth. Now, what becomes difficult as you begin to grow on the spiritual journey, as we always say on the show, to grow, prosper, and evolve, as you begin to grow, prosper, and evolve, you start to realize that denial is really keeping you from growth. Because when you don't know what's there, you can't possibly heal it. When you don't know what's there, you can't possibly heal it. So another reason to talk about this topic of fear is sometimes we act like we're too spiritual to feel fear. And then when it really happens, we don't know how to handle it because we've been in such denial. So denial is not only, it is refusing to see the truth, but when you stay in denial, when you know something's trying to come up and you stay in denial, what you're saying is, I'm unwilling to see the truth. And frankly, in most people, this happens on a daily basis, that we are either afraid or unwilling to see the truth. But again, when we begin to grow, we begin to realize that when I move out of denial, that's when true healing can happen. True healing can happen when I move out of denial. Yeah, true healing can happen when I move out of denial. And really, fear is actually what keeps us in denial, isn't it? It's like fear and denial are so closely related because if we're afraid to face the truth, we stay in denial and say, well, it's not even happening. It's not even happening. So as I'm saying all this, I want to be super clear that fear is nothing to be ashamed of, but fear is something to be worked. On the spiritual journey, on the soul journey, fear is to be worked. And what I mean by that is, again, we face the fear, we walk around inside it, we confront it, and then we get that fear to begin to dissipate and back down, and then our soul can shine through. So the reason we walk around inside the fear is so the soul can shine through. So if we know fear is a part of the curriculum and we know denying it keeps us from the truth, then we know that facing it and conquering it, of course, will be big soul work and bring one of the biggest blessings of our lives, probably. I think, frankly, every time we face fear and conquer it, it is the biggest blessing of the day. It's the biggest blessing of the week. It's like, oh, wow, I did that. I've had many members of my churches and friends and family for that matter too, who've gone through big health challenges. I myself have been through a couple big health challenges. And what I've realized as I've gone through it, until I know what's going on, I'm in the dark, right? I'm unconscious as to what's happening. But like if there's something up in the body and I get it checked out and I find out what it is, then I can be about healing it. Even if I'm afraid, even if fear comes up, well, I know it's worse to not face it because for sure I won't heal then. So think about all the things that we fear. And I just want to speak about these again because I want you to be able to listen to what I'm saying and really, really apply it to whatever area you may be working on. A big one for everyone I know today is a financial fear. As prices go up, as interest rates soar, as fuel is so costly, that the fear that I will not have enough money is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. As we age, there's also the fear of aging, of what's going to happen. Who will take care of me? Will my body hold up? And the many of the fears that we have, like loss of job or maybe fear of losing a friend or loss of health, it becomes almost this menacing inner demon until we face it. And I'm reminded of, there's a scene in the movie Home Alone, and I will put the link to it, even though it's a very short clip. It'll give you the idea. In the movie Home Alone, where the little boy is left as the family goes on vacation, he's really caught in fear by this furnace in the basement. And the furnace in the basement kind of takes on this character of the menacing demon, and the little boy hears it talk to him and scare him. It says like, "Hello, Kevin," And finally, the kid looks at the furnace and says, "Shut up." That's it. Just shut up. And it was at that moment, I think, that he was able to conquer the fear. So rather than listening to this voice of this fiery furnace, he was able to confront it. And when he told it to shut up, it no longer had any power over him. And I love this image because of this little boy taking that power and just claiming it for himself. What's so interesting about all of us as we've grown, our whole childhood, basically, we have had to face fear. Like when we were crawling, we learned to walk, and then we learned to run, and then we learned to ride a bike. All those things were about facing fears. All of those things were about facing fears. Coming into puberty often is filled with fear and what's happening to me. Our first kiss, our graduating from high school, our whatever's next for us, whether it's work or college, each step has fear come up to be conquered. So again, the reason we're discussing this, the reason we're taking an entire show to talk about fear is, if we don't deal with it, fear keeps us from living a spiritual life. Fear, in fact, keeps us from living a God-centered life. Fear can keep us in the bondage of the past. Often, fears are based upon where we came from and not what's happening now. Yeah, fears are often based on the past. And, when we overlay fears from the past on the moment now, that's called projection, right? We're projecting an old situation onto the present moment. What's so amazing is the power of the mind to make connections, like when something's similar, that it's like the trigger goes off and all of a sudden, we're 30 years earlier, 40 years earlier, and 20 years earlier, whatever may have happened, and we're right back in that moment. And so what's so interesting is that all of those thoughts, all of those memories really do live in our psyche. So it would behoove us to really tap into and get in touch with the power we have over our thoughts in the mind, over our feelings, the emotional nature. And in fact, work with shifting those thoughts, but not by pretending the fear isn't there, because remember, that's denial, but walking inside the fear, seeing what it is, questioning it, sitting in silence, breathing into it, looking at it, listening to it, getting a new perspective on it. So give this some thought just for a moment. How am my thoughts wrapping themselves around an issue and creating more fear? How am I kind of wrapping my mind around something I'm afraid of, and that adding to the fear rather than diminishing it? So let me give you a couple of examples. When I was a teenager, I did some mission work in Brazil. I would do that totally differently today, but it was such a gift in my life and world at the time. And I went with a group from our high school. We learned Portuguese to a degree to go. I memorized my testimony in Portuguese, and I learned to sing, and I learned to play guitar for that trip. And I still play guitar today. I'm so grateful for that opportunity to learn. And when I went there, part of our role was to help a man who was a pilot. He was a pilot that would take supplies and things into the bush, on his plane, would drop supplies and then, go back home, refuel, whatever. So our job, he always called us the campers, was for the campers to get the plane ready to, in this case, when I was there, we actually drove into the interior. I drove in Brazil, which was an experience for another show. That was a fear all its own. And that said, we were helping with supplies. We drove to the interior. And the other thing that we did is we went around the town where this man lived. He was married and they had a couple kids. And we would walk from door to door, and we'd invite people in for singing and a message that night. And it was really, it's unusual for the area we were in to have Americans visit at all. So it was striking to have Americans come to the homes and personally invite. Yeah, it was quite unusual to have Americans there. And so we made friends easily and quickly, but we were mostly going out 2 by 2 to visit the homes and invite people to church. Well, part of what I was doing, I got to this road, and the road had this eerie, dark feeling to it. And of course, where we were, There were no real homes exactly. I mean, there were shacks. Some people were living kind of under sticks or lean-tos that had been made. It was kind of a shanty town, And this one road had a few little shacks in it. And I was standing kind of to the entrance of this road. It was a little bit of a crossroads in the town. And as I looked down the road, I thought, I don't know why, but I am really scared. And as I looked down the road, I started to look back and I felt something say, just go forward. And so I thought, I have flown how many thousands of miles to do this? Scared or not, I'm going to go. And as I began to walk, I noticed with each step, I kind of felt better and better and better. And as it turned out, one of the homes I got to was a home that was a brothel, and a man answered the door with not many clothes on. And I invited them to service. And in fact, I think 3 of the women came to service. Interestingly, though, when I told the missionary the road I had been down, he said, "Oh my God, you went there." And I said, "Well, I thought that was, part of where we were supposed to go." He goes, "Well, that's kind of the outskirts of town. I didn't expect you to go there." And so he said, "That's not very safe." Well, what was so interesting is that here I was, a teenager. I think I was 15 years old, walking down this bad part of town in Brazil. But as I faced the fear, I was not afraid. That said, I was using my head. I was careful. I was watching, my surroundings, and I was safe. I was safe in God. But had I listened to the fear, there are women that were selling their bodies for money that would have never heard that God loves them. And they got that night. That's what we would say in Portuguese, Deus te ama. God loves you. God loves you. So friends, facing the fear, walking around inside it, seeing what it has to tell you, is not only a blessing to you, but it's a blessing to those you love, those you serve, those you work with. As you face the fear, you really tap into a spiritual power that goes beyond this world. The spiritual power is the Christ. It is the highest spiritual energy there is. It is the spirit and energy of light, of healing, of unconditional love, of forgiveness, of peace. It takes a great deal of courage to walk inside of fear. Most will never do it. But I know our listeners are a kind of spiritual warrior where we really want to do the deeper work because more than anything, we want to heal, we want to experience goodness, and we want to be a blessing in the world. So friends, my prayer for you, my hope for you is that as you have fears come up or these, old triggers where you want to just go, I don't want to look at that. I want you to look at it. I want you to get help looking at it. You might need support of a therapist. You might need some counseling or coaching. I can help you with that. There may be somebody in your local community that could work with you one-on-one. There might be a support group for survivors of abuse that could support you. Think about it. What do I need to have the strength to walk inside of the fear, to face it, to confront it, to get that fear to dissipate and back down so that my soul can shine through? This is our goal. So I'm really supporting you in this, friends. I'm doing this myself. I've been practicing it for years. Some things are easier than others. But what I know is every time I conquer something, even a small fear, it brings a blessing. I can see a little more light at the end of the tunnel, and I feel more light in my heart and soul. And this is why I do this work. So friends, my prayer for you again is to have the faith, have the courage to look at this fear face it, confront it, get inside of it, and work it so that fear can back down and dissipate, and you can live your soul. You can let your soul shine wherever you may be. Just know that we're always supporting you in prayer, that we appreciate tremendously your support of the show, because we love to bring you the show to support your life and world. So I look forward to seeing you in person. I look forward to bringing you a new message next week. And blessings on the journey, dear friend.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2023, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.